The gym buzzed with life. Laughter echoed off polished bleachers. Flashbulbs burst like tiny stars. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder, craning necks to catch a glimpse of their graduates. The air smelled like roses and hairspray and pride. But in the very last row, one seat away from the aisle, Emma sat in silence. Her gown was neatly pressed, her cap perched just right. But her eyes were tired. Not from exams, not from late nights. From carrying something no one else in the room had to. All around her, mothers clutched tissues, fathers straightened ties. Families waved, shouted, whistled. Emma's hands stayed folded in her lap. No one next to her. No one waiting with a camera. No one holding a handmade sign with her name. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from trembling. Her father had died 3 years ago in a desert far from home. Her mother had walked out long before that, a ghost with no return address. The system had done its best, so had Emma. But today she was on her own. The principal's voice boomed from the mic. And now, Emma Rose Duval Dash. She blinked, swallowed, and stood. Each step to the stage felt heavier than the last. Not from nerves, but from the quiet weight of absence. No one shouted her name. No one clapped louder than the rest. No proud voice from the crowd saying, "That's my girl." Just polite applause, polished and hollow. Emma reached the podium, took her diploma, smiled for the camera, the school's, not anyone else's. She turned, looked out at a sea of proud faces, and not one of them was looking for her. As she walked back down the steps, her eyes scanned the crowd, just in case. But the seat beside her stayed empty, just like it had for most of her life. She sat back down. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. And without a word, a single tear slipped down her cheek. She took the diploma in both hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, but because of everything she wished had led to it. No warm hug. No whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Dash." No camera flashes aimed just at her. She turned her body slightly, out of habit, as if someone might still be there to snap the moment. No one was. Behind her, another name echoed through the speakers. A boy with a rowdy family. A burst of cheers. A father whistling from the crowd. His mother holding a sign that said, "Our future Dr. Dash." Emma smiled, just barely. A flicker. More muscle memory than joy. She returned to her seat and sat down slowly. Her gown rustled softly against the plastic chair. A breeze blew in from the open gym doors, but she didn't feel it. All she could feel was the hollow space beside her. An empty chair. And in that emptiness lived everything she tried not to think about. Her father's voice on old voicemail she never deleted. The one photo of them taped to the inside of her closet. His promise, "I'll be there when it matters most, Dash." But he wasn't. Not today. She stared straight ahead, eyes locked on the stage, not to watch, but to avoid meeting anyone else's gaze. People all around her were crying, but for the right reasons. Parents wiping away tears of joy. Siblings shouting from the aisles. Friends throwing arms around each other. Emma's hands gripped her diploma like it might disappear if she let go. And then, another wave of applause. Another graduate, another family photo moment. A burst of laughter. It hurt worse than silence. Not because it was cruel, but because it reminded her what it felt like to be unseen in a room full of celebration. She blinked fast. Too fast. But the tears still came. One slipped down, catching the corner of her mouth before she could brush it away. She turned her head slightly, just enough so no one would see. But no one was looking anyway. And in that moment, Emma was surrounded by joy, but completely alone. From the shadowed wing just off stage, Mr. Hansen stood with his arms folded gently across his chest. He had taught English at Lincoln High for nearly 25 years. He'd seen every kind of student walk across that stage, the confident, the anxious, the brilliant, the broken. But today his eyes were fixed on one, Emma. He saw her smile when her name was called, polite, practiced, empty. He saw the way her shoulders curled inward when no one clapped louder than the rest. He noticed how no flash went off for her, how no arms opened up in embrace. And when she sat back down, chin trembling ever so slightly, he felt something stir in his chest. A memory, a promise. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers brushed against the edge of an envelope. He pulled it out slowly, carefully, like it was glass. The handwriting across the front stopped him. For Emma, on graduation day dash. Slanted, all caps, ink faded slightly. It was unmistakably written by hand. Her father's hand. Mr. Hansen swallowed the tightness in his throat. He had kept this envelope in his desk drawer for 3 years. Only now did he realize how heavy it had become. The stage faded behind him. The applause softened, and he stepped down toward the rows of chairs. Emma didn't notice him at first. She was staring down at her lap, blinking too often, trying too hard not to cry. He walked slowly, then gently knelt beside her. She turned, startled, her eyes wide, glassy. Before she could speak, he held out the envelope. "Your dad," he said, voice low, just for her. He glanced away for a second, then looked back. "He gave this to me, just in case he couldn't be here dash." Emma froze. Her eyes dropped to the envelope, then back to Mr. Hansen. She took it with both hands, carefully, like she was afraid it might vanish. Her fingers ran over the handwriting. Her breath caught, and then she whispered, "Thank you, dash." Mr. Hansen nodded, gave her shoulder the smallest, most reverent squeeze, and stepped away, leaving her with silence. And one final message, from the man who loved her most. Emma stared at the envelope like it might disappear if she blinked. The edges were a little worn, but the seal had never been broken. Her name, written in the same familiar handwriting she hadn't seen in years, stared back at her. For Emma, on graduation day dash. Her hands trembled as she slid her thumb beneath the flap. She paused for a moment, eyes closed, breath held, then opened it. Inside was a single folded page, creased neatly in thirds. She unfolded it slowly, and as she began to read, the world around her faded. Voiceover begins, her father's voice, soft, steady, unmistakable. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. And I'm sorry. I wanted nothing more than to be there. Front row, biggest smile, probably crying harder than you. But if I couldn't be, then I still wanted to say this dash." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek, landing on the paper. She didn't wipe it away. Her hands trembled, but her eyes didn't leave the page. "I know today might feel empty, but look around you. You made it. You did it without me, without your mom, without the noise and the cheering. And that doesn't make it any less incredible. It makes it more Dash. As the voice spoke, images flickered across her memory, as vivid as the ink before her. Her father jogging beside her, one hand barely gripping the back of her tiny pink bike. "Don't look down, look up," he laughed. She wobbled, screamed, then kept going. "You're doing it. That's my girl." Him at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. Dash, glue stick in hand, helping her finish a poster about volcanoes. "We're definitely getting an A for this, or at least a B+ for effort Dash." Their final hug before deployment. He knelt to her height, held her by the shoulders, and whispered, "Whatever happens, you keep going, for me Dash." Back in the gym, Emma's breath caught as the voice continued. "You've grown into the kind of person I only dreamed of raising. Kind, strong, brave enough to cry and still keep moving. I may not be in the crowd today, but I've never taken my eyes off you, Dash." A soft sob escaped her lips, but it didn't echo. It didn't feel lonely. It felt warm, like a hand on her shoulder, a whisper behind her ear. "And wherever your life takes you from this moment on, know this. I love you. I am proud of you. And you were never alone, Dash." Emma folded the letter slowly, held it close to her chest. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she smiled through the tears. The letter trembled in Emma's lap, but something slipped from the envelope. A smaller rectangle of paper, smooth and worn soft at the edges. A photograph. She picked it up with 2 fingers, slowly flipping it over. And the moment she saw it, her breath caught. It was her, age 6, hair in 2 crooked braids, gap-toothed grin, and a red backpack hanging off one shoulder. And beside her, her father, kneeling down, one arm wrapped around her, his hand clasping hers tightly as they stood in front of the school gates. The first day of 1st grade. The picture wasn't posed. It was real. A moment caught between nervous giggles and a whispered, "You've got this, Dash." Emma stared at it like it had been dug up from a different lifetime. On the back, written in familiar black ink, barely faded over time, "You were never alone, and you never will be, Dash." The words sank into her like sunlight into cold skin. And that was it. The dam broke. Her hand flew to her mouth, trying to quiet the sob that rose from her chest. Tears spilled, but they weren't sharp this time. They didn't sting. They fell with purpose. Every drop was a memory, a reminder, a healing. Because in that instant, surrounded by rows of students and strangers and noise, she felt held, not by applause, not by a crowd, but by him, by the little girl who still lived in her, and by the man who made sure she knew she was never walking alone. She clutched the photo to her chest, pressed it to her heart like it might anchor her to the moment. To him, the letter crinkled softly in her other hand. Her breath came in broken waves, but her shoulders straightened. For the first time all day, she didn't look down. She looked up, at the stage, at the light pouring in from the tall gym windows, at the future stretching out like a road she wasn't afraid to walk anymore. And in her chest, through the grief, through the longing, she felt something settle. Peace. She was still crying, but now, the tears were different. She hadn't realized Mr. Hanson was still there. Not until his voice, gentle as a breeze, broke through the storm inside her. "Emma," he said softly, "come with me, Dash." She blinked at him. Her cheeks were wet, her breath uneven. The photo trembled in her hand, the letter pressed to her chest. She didn't speak, just nodded. He offered his arm, not as a teacher, but as someone standing in for a father who couldn't. Together, they walked. past the last row of seats, past her empty chair, past students who had barely noticed her before. The music faded, the laughter fell quiet, and then the gym fell completely still. She reached the base of the stage. Mr. Hanson paused, gave her a small nod. She climbed the steps alone, but she wasn't alone anymore. Not really. She turned to face the crowd, her classmates, her teachers, their families. Her hands shook, but her voice, when it came, was steady. She unfolded the letter. Tears still shimmered in her eyes, but there was strength now. Something had shifted, and in a voice that echoed across the gym, she read one single line. I am proud of you, no matter where I am, dash. Silence, like the world held its breath with her. No one moved. No one spoke. Not even the youngest sibling fidgeting in the crowd made a sound. And then, a sound like thunder. But it wasn't rain. It was applause. The first clap came from Mr. Hanson, then a mother near the front, then a row of students, then the entire gymnasium, on its feet, applauding a girl they didn't know, but would never forget. Not because she was the loudest, not because she was the most decorated, but because she stood up when it mattered and let love speak through her when words were hardest to find. Emma looked out at the sea of standing figures, and in that roar of hands meeting hands, she felt seen, truly seen, not just as the girl who cried alone, but as the one who carried love with her and shared it exactly when it was needed most. The classroom smelled like pencil shavings and rain. Outside, gray clouds tapped gently against the windows. Inside, the room was full of quiet rustling, backpacks unzipped, papers exchanged, the low hum of middle school voices. But in the back row, near the window, a girl sat alone. Shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on her desk, hair falling in front of her face like a curtain she didn't want pulled back. Emma noticed her immediately, not because she was loud, because she wasn't, because she recognized that stillness. That kind of silence doesn't come from shyness. It comes from something deeper, something heavy. Emma stood at the front of the room, holding a stack of essays, but her focus had shifted entirely. She made her way toward the back, soft steps, slow breath. The other students didn't notice. She knelt beside the girl's desk, close enough to be present, far enough to not startle her. The girl didn't look up. Emma smiled softly, and in a voice warm as wool, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to be, dash." The girl's fingers twitched, just barely. Emma glanced at the notebook on the desk. Blank, the pencil untouched. "I don't know what you're carrying," she said gently, "but I do know what it feels like to carry it alone, dash." The girl's eyes lifted, cautious and wide. Emma's heart tugged, because behind those eyes was something too familiar. Grief, loneliness, a hope barely hanging on. She reached out slowly, not to fix, not to question, just to be there. And then, soft as breath, Emma whispered, "You're not alone. Not anymore, dash." For a moment, the classroom disappeared. The fluorescent lights, the scratching pens, the ticking clock, all gone. Just two people, one moment, one kindness passed down like a torch. Emma didn't cry, but something in her heart softened. Because years ago, a teacher had knelt beside her, offered her a letter, a hand, a beginning. And now, she was doing the same. And that, she realized, was the legacy her father left behind. Not in ink, not in a photograph, but in the way she showed up for someone, exactly when they needed it. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't the ones that echo. They're the quiet ones. The ones whispered in empty gymnasiums, folded into old envelopes, written in shaky handwriting on the back of a photo. Emma stood at the window of her classroom, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Behind her, the room hummed with young lives, laughter, footsteps, pencil taps. But her mind drifted back to a tear-stained letter, to a single sentence that changed everything. "I am proud of you, no matter where I am, Dash." That sentence had been her anchor, her map, her breath. It didn't erase the grief, but it gave it shape. It gave her direction. Because grief, she had learned, is not an ending. It's a doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is legacy. A kind of love that doesn't vanish when the person does. A kind of strength that blooms not in celebration, but in solitude. Today, Emma carried that legacy in her hands, in her voice, in every quiet gesture that said, "I see you. You matter. You're not alone, Dash." She smiled. Not for the world, not for a photo, but for the girl she used to be, and the woman she had become. Final voiceover line as camera fades out. We don't get to choose who stays, but we do get to choose what stays with us, Dash.